What does it mean to be a gentleman? This is obviously something that's been lost in society in so many ways as we continue to reject tradition. We've kind of just left behind this concept of being a gentleman and what it actually means and what we should strive to do, how we should live as men and as gentlemen. But Cardinal John Henry Newman wrote this definition of a gentleman many years ago, which I think has some powerful insights for us today as modern men. Today, we're going to take a look at those and we're going to dive deeper into how it applies to how we live today as men in the modern world. Let's get into this. All right, so taking a look here, I'm going to read from Cardinal John Henry Newman's definition of a gentleman. This is something you can just find by searching it on the internet. I'm going to read certain portions of it, and then we'll give some reflection and talk about what it means for us today. His benefits may be considered as parallel to what are called comforts or conveniences and arrangements of a personal nature, like an easy chair or a good fire, which do their part in dispelling cold and fatigue, though nature provides both means of rest and animal heat without them. The true gentleman, in like manner, carefully avoids whatever may cause a jar or a jolt in the minds of those with whom he is cast. All clashing of opinion or collision of feeling, all restraint or suspicion, or gloom or resentment, his great concern being to make everyone at his ease and at home. He has eyes on all his company. He is tender towards the bashful, gentle towards the distant, and merciful towards the absurd. He can recollect to whom he is speaking. He guards against unseasonable allusions or topics which may irritate. He is seldom prominent in conversation and never wearisome. He makes light of favors while he does them and seems to be receiving when he is conferring. All right, I want to pause here and talk about this a little bit. So the first paragraph, you can see he's very philosophical in the way that he describes this. It's somewhat poetic. I think there's a lot of analogies in here, and it really needs some unpacking and diving into to fully understand it and to apply it to our everyday life. And so I really like in the beginning here, he talks about removing the obstacles which hinder the free and unembarrassed action of those about him. The overall takeaways you can kind of get from this passage, this first half of it, I read about half of it so far. The first thing is just making it easier for others to move. Making it easier for others to live, to be at home, to be in comfort, right? And it doesn't mean that you can apply this in the wrong ways, right? To think that you should always, as a father, strive to make your children's lives as comfortable as possible. That's obviously not true. But this is really kind of put into like a situation of a dinner party, or I think of myself in any kind of major social situation. If we're at a gala or fundraiser, or if we're at Mass, after Mass, right? Just at donuts on Sunday Mass, any type of collection or gathering of people, to think of myself as this gentleman, to put myself in this situation, to think about other people. The main theme to me, the biggest takeaway, is being others focused and not self-focused. Others focused, not self-focused. It's so easy to be in social circumstances or situations where I want to, because I'm somebody who, as you maybe have assumed by this point, have a lot of hot takes. I like to talk about things that are kind of divisive. I like to talk about philosophical conversations, theological things, to debate different political issues. I love doing all of those things. The key thing here is that there's a time and a place for that. Just because I like it doesn't mean that it's the right thing for every circumstance, for every situation, right? Sometimes those things will lead to themselves and it'll just become obvious that that's kind of the mood of the room or the situation that we're in. But it's often not the case. It's just as often the case that we are not called to do that. That sometimes we are called to just put others at ease, to get to know people, to make it so that they have a good time, not just try to satisfy my own desire and need to debate or have serious conversation. It's okay sometimes to be focused on what other people want or need in a situation. And so he goes on to talk about this. He says his benefits may be considered as parallel to what are called comforts or conveniences. And so think about that. That's going above and beyond. Comforts and conveniences. That's kind of the benefit of having around or being around a true gentleman, according to Cardinal Newman here. He's saying that, like an easy chair or a good fire, their benefits, like dispelling cold or fatigue, are provided by nature, right? You can sit on the ground. You can create your own bodily warmth. But there's still something just nice and pleasant about having a fire or sitting in a nice and comfortable chair. We all know this experience where you've sat in a chair and you're like, wow, this couch is extremely comfortable, or you're cold, or it's just even just a little chilly outside, and you're around a fire, or the fire's on in a house or in a restaurant. You walk inside and there's just nice chairs by a cozy fire. It's wonderful. It's a beautiful experience. It feels a lot of Christmas music, right? Talks about these very things. And he says that these are kind of the benefits of having a gentleman around, where it's not necessarily that he's going above and beyond and giving you your fundamental, your basic needs, but he's just doing these kind of things that just make it more pleasant. It just make life better. And that's, I think, something that's fundamental and key to being a gentleman is your main thing. It's just like opening the car door for a woman, right? It's something I'm not extremely good about with my wife. I have enjoyed recently. She's come across some content that says that the new opening the door for your wife once you have children is just putting the baby in the car, right? It's like taking care of the toddler in the car seat and or carrying the car seat out to the car. And those are the kind of things, right? That you don't need to, open the car door for your wife. She knows how to open the door. She's capable of getting in the car for herself. But just kind of this nice pleasantry. You don't need to go out and start her car in the morning when it's cold before she goes to work or takes the kids somewhere. But it's nice, right? It's nice to have. These are the definitional things of like gentlemanly things. You don't need to bring her flowers home from work, but it is nice to have flowers in the home. It makes the home more beautiful and it makes her happy. And so these are kind of the benefits when you're talking about being a gentleman. These are some of the things we've lost. It's just being others focused in minor ways. To be at dinner, something I do pretty well when we have people over for dinner is being at dinner and enjoying the conversation, being present in the conversation, but also noticing, oh, hey, your water glass is empty. Do you mind if I refill that for you? May I get you some more water? Would you like anything else to drink? Could I get you a napkin or just little things like that where you notice, hey, there's something missing in this person, their experience, the things that they have available to them, and I could actually solve that. I could fix that. That's like an easy chair or a good fire. And so he goes on to talk about the gentleman in like manner carefully avoids whatever may cause a jar or jolt in the minds of those with whom he is cast. This is something that is missing in so many modern men who are more masculine, but they don't have this same recognition of other people's needs or disposition. And for lack of a better term, this is what we would call kind of the autistic man, right? Everybody's talking about autism. If you're in kind of that world of Joe Rogan's and comedians, Shane Gillis, Theo Vaughn, all this stuff, which I very much enjoy a lot of those guys. There's things that I disagree with them on, but I have friends who say when they have people over there, they like to ask, but what's your autistic trait? This isn't to make fun of autistic people or to mock people with autism, but I think it's an interesting question because it frames things in a very specific way to say, like, what's kind of your OCD trait or your thing that you care more about than a lot of other people do, or you get really honed in on or fixated on. And a lot of people talk about how most men are autistic. We just have it in different ways, right? There's different flavors of it. But you have very clearly people who are seriously autistic or people who are just socially awkward and don't have that recognition. But I think the main thing about being a gentleman, why I loved this when I was in college, as this was forming me and when I was becoming a man and understanding what masculinity and manhood was, is just this awareness of other people, this emotional intelligence. That's really what everything he's talking about is. It's just to have the emotional intelligence to say, and to be others focused enough to say, yes, in this large setting, in this group, I don't need to be the center of attention. I don't need to be controversial for the sake of being controversial. We were just recently at a party, at a gathering of people, and there was one of the husbands who was kind of like this, who just wanted to talk about very divisive or controversial topics and kind of dominate the conversation in this larger group. And having read this and just kind of having this awareness, I could recognize that and see that. Like certain other people were turned off by this conversation, or they didn't want to be part of it, or they were bored by it. And that's just objectively not good. It's not good to be that self-focused or that self-driven where you're just trying to be controversial or spark things or debate things just for the sake of doing it. And I'm somebody who loves hot takes. I love having hard conversations. And there's times over whiskey amongst, maybe it's just men or amongst people who like to debate, where you have those conversations and those things. But that doesn't mean that it's always that time. It's kind of like the analogy people say, if you're a hammer, then everything you see looks like a nail. And a lot of people will describe Trump this way, that he only has one way of acting. And we saw this recently with his Easter post was a good example of this. Oh, we should post something for Easter, wishing people happy Easter. And he decides that's an opportunity to talk about radical lunatic leftists. And that's a great example of violating Cardinal Newman's definition of a gentleman. And I say this as somebody who voted for Trump, twice now, the last 2 elections. I didn't vote in 2016. I would never vote for Hillary, but I just didn't vote. And that's a whole nother story. But that's not a statement on whether or not you should vote. But I voted for Trump. I generally like Trump. I like a lot of the things that he's doing, a lot of the things that he's done. But that Easter post was horrific and stupid and just didn't make any sense. But when you're a hammer, everything you see is a nail. A lot of people describe him that way because that's how so many of us can get into this kind of phase where it's like that's all we can talk about. And we have to be locked in on that. And I've heard that he's not like that sometimes. I think you talked to Bill Maher, like he's not always like that. Bill Maher just talked about meeting with President Trump, and he actually liked him a lot more than he expected he would. And I think that's an important thing and a good thing that he's actually able to have these conversations. But sometimes publicly he can just be that, where everything is a nail and he's just constantly trying to hit. And that is not right and not good for a gentleman to do. He goes on here, all clashing of opinion or collision of feeling, all restraint or suspicion or gloom or resentment, he avoids. And so that's really big. Talk about suspicion, gloom, or resentment. Who among us has not felt that for other people? But the key thing here is this definition of a gentleman is truly how a Christian gentleman should live, and that we shouldn't hold resentment towards other people. That even when you're at parties or things, and I'm very guilty of this, of seeing people who have wronged me in the past or who have wronged family members or whatever it might be, it's easy to be resentful. It's easy to hold that and to kind of have that front of mind when you're talking to people. But we know that we're not meant to do that. We're not meant to hold resentments towards others. We're meant to let that go, and we're meant to avoid some of those things. Now, I wouldn't say all clashing of opinion. There's times where you should clash with opinion. There's times to stand up for truth. But there's also a reality that you're probably not changing somebody's mind. I mean, just again, at another social gathering we were at, somebody was trying to like fight with somebody over abortion while we're like having appetizers. And you're probably not converting somebody from their pro-choice stance during, mozzarella sticks. And there's times to stand up for the truth. There's no doubt about it. And you should never consent or agree with things that are morally or objectively wrong. But I think there's something to saying, hey, we should get a drink sometime. I'd love to get to know you better. I'd love to, have some one-on-one time, or just recognizing situations. There are situations at parties and things to evangelize, to do those things. I've been that person before when I was very young and zealous for our faith and wanted to just evangelize at any given opportunity that something serious came up. But you'd be surprised at how much good can come from really listening to somebody, sharing, some mild encouragement, and following up with them at a later date while praying for them. One thing I love here is he says he has his eyes on all his company. And he gives some great example here. He is tender towards the bashful. This means you notice when somebody's shy. And I've tried to really be good about this in the last decade of my life. When you are somewhere, you see somebody who's more quiet, actually proactively going out and asking them questions, getting to know them better, trying to invite them into the conversation. It's really important. And it's something that, as someone who's very talkative and opinionated and doesn't mind being the center of attention, that I had to be really intentional with. To say, okay, this person's shy, this person's kind of bashful, and I need to ask them like, hey, where did you grow up? Where are you from? What do you do for work? What's your family like? Do you have siblings? Those kinds of things. Gentle towards the distant. This is, again, somebody who maybe isn't bashful, but maybe has their reservations about you or the situation and is just kind of being distant. So being gentle and inviting them into conversation and being present. And then merciful towards the absurd. So seeing somebody like this gentleman who I was talking about the other day, no pun intended there was gentleman, who was being very divisive or gregarious in some of these conversations and dominated conversations, being gentle towards that. Not saying, yo, dude, shut up. Like, let's not talk about this right now. But being tactful in the way that you steer the direction of the conversation back to something that maybe more people would like to talk about. It's kind of like playing chess in social situations, which is what you'll see the gentleman does. I love that it says he can recollect to whom he is speaking. This means that he knows who he's talking to. And he knows them in a way that is really important and fundamental to who that person is. So getting to know the heart of people, knowing their likes, their interests, their dislikes, knowing things about them and remembering those things. This is something I've been really bad about in the past of my life. It's just immediately hearing somebody's name and forgetting it, saying, oh, I'm probably never going to see this person again. That's the opposite of how saints treated meeting new people, right? There's a great story about St. John Paul II meeting a priest back when I think JP2 was an archbishop, and they were both in Rome, and it's like 3 decades later, and he's now the Pope, and this guy was a seminarian at the time, I think, and now he's like a priest or a bishop, and he goes to meet JP2, and he says, hey, we've met before. And the priest is like, or the bishop is like, no, we haven't met before, Your Holiness. I think you're confusing me with somebody else. And he says, oh, okay. And JP2, being a gentleman, doesn't argue with him and just says, oh, okay, maybe I am forgetting. And he says later that like the assistant to the Pope went out to the archbishop or the priest and said, you have met the Holy Father before. It was when you were in Rome in 1972 on the steps of this church, and he was archbishop and you were a seminarian. Were you studying in Rome at that time? And he says, yes, I was. And he says, the Holy Father remembers meeting you there. He said, I would recommend not disagreeing with him in the future. He's almost always right with his memory. And JP2, Mother Teresa had this as well. They're very good. Many saints at remembering names because they treated everyone as though they were meeting Christ himself. And they just saw so much the dignity of the other person. They could see Jesus in the other person so powerfully that they never forgot. And they were very attentive to other people. They're very present. This is something that I describe a lot of times when at both times I've interacted and met Father Mike Schmitz. He's very, very present with you. He's very attentive to you. He doesn't treat you as just some passing fan who's excited to meet him. He really wants to know you. He wants to hear your name. He wants to know where you're from. He wants to learn things about you. And no, he doesn't remember every single detail of every person that he meets, but he does really try, I think, to get to know it and be present with people. And this is something that I can be really bad about when I'm speaking at an event or even just at an event at church. And it's like, oh, this person doesn't matter and I don't need to remember their name or remember them. But you'd be amazed at how much it can mean to people when you actually take time to learn their name and to know them. And so I love that. He recollects to whom he is speaking. And to not be afraid as a gentleman to say, hey, I'm terribly sorry, but can you remind me your name when you forget somebody's name and not just brushing past it, right? And just acting like it's more important for you to act like you know them even though you don't. But to be willing to have the humility and be embarrassed and say, hey, I'm sorry, I totally forget your name. Will you please remind me? This was another one that's challenging for me. He said he is seldom prominent in conversation. Again, I'm somebody who likes to be the center of attention. I like to talk. I can be loud. I like to tell stories. But to not be prominent in conversation, to make that a goal of yours, especially when you're in a group setting, but even when you're one-on-one, if you read even a secular literature like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, we'll talk about this, is that you should be interested, not try to be interesting. And it's so tempting to try to be interesting to other people. I want to impress you. I want to tell you about these stories. Let me tell you about my deployment to Afghanistan. And let me tell you about my time speaking with Father Mike Schmitz. Let me tell you about these recent experiences I have, or my podcast, or my coaching program, or my job that I have that is really cool that a lot of Catholics care about. Instead of that, let me be more interested in you. Let me try to learn as much as I can about you. Now, you can be annoying with this. I think you can go overboard, right? There's a virtuous mean in the middle here somewhere where you are interested in other people, you're asking questions, but there's some people who you talk to, this honestly, I think goes a little bit back to the TISM stuff. I've known some guys, there was actually some people we were even friends with that like I had to stop being friends with them because I couldn't take this all the time. Just being, it was like 20 questions every time we were together. You can't ask a question and you can't get more than 6 words into an answer before there's another question being asked. How's work doing? Okay, and how's your family? And how's your mom? And how's this going? Are you guys moving? Well, how's that going? Have you listed a house yet? And it's like, dude, okay. Take it easy. I appreciate you being interested in my life. I appreciate you being curious. I want to share with you, but you have to give me a second to talk. Part of asking the questions is giving people time to answer the question, right? And if somebody does ask you a question, you don't have to say, oh yeah, I work at Hallow, but let's go back on to what we were talking about. Tell me more about you. Tell me more about your job. Somebody asking you questions is okay. That's normal. They want to get to know you. They want to have conversation. And so the point here is not being prominent in conversation, not dominating the conversation. We all know this too. I just had this experience the other day at church where there was a leader at the church. I'm not going to say who it was, but I'm talking with somebody, a friend of mine. We just started to talk. I'm holding my baby. We're talking about the baby. And I turned and said, how are you? How have you been recently? I haven't talked to you in a few weeks. And she's like, I'm okay. And getting ready to go in about how work's been difficult. And then up comes this guy and he's just like, oh, does your baby have you wrapped around her finger yet? This woman was actively speaking. She was actively talking to me. And this guy comes up, a leader at the church, older gentleman, and comes up and just interrupts and just starts talking. Does she have you wrapped around your finger yet? Oh, and I'm like, dude, she was talking. One, to not see that we were in the middle of conversation. And then 2, to just interrupt in that conversation, not to acknowledge her at all or to say, oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to say hi. You can interrupt people, but doing it tactfully to say, hey, I recognize that I'm interrupting. This is a faux pas, right? I'm making I'm crossing the line here a little bit. Just wanted to say hello. please go back to your conversation. I'll let you go, but just wanted to say hello. Hope you're doing well. Great to see you with the baby. You can do those kinds of things, but having that awareness to say, I don't need to be dominant in conversation. The things that I have to say are not more important than the things other people have to say. That's a powerful thing to just admit to yourself and to just realize the things that I want to say are not inherently more important than the things other people have to say or want to say. That's important to realize. It's important to recognize. And it's okay, my friends, to accept that and to embrace that. And to not be wearisome. You don't want people at the end of the conversation to you just be like, man, I can't wait to stop talking to this dude. Man, I can't wait to stop talking to this woman. She's just so much. And to realize that and to have that awareness to see in other people, right? It's called social awareness. In emotional intelligence, there's 4 main quadrants. You have self-awareness and self-management, others awareness and others management. And to have that others awareness is really, really key. To be able to see, okay, this person is not enjoying talking to me. They want to go on. They want to move on. We've all had this experience at places. We're going to become that. It's usually older people who do this. And so this is really important for us. For those of you out there, you're in your 20s, your 30s, to be aware of these things so you can try to avoid that. And then this last line here in this part, and we're going to go on here in a little bit, but this last line is so good. He makes light of favors while he does them and seems to be receiving when he is conferring. One of Emily's uncles recently helped my mom. My mom had a dead car battery, and I forget what I was doing. I was either taking my son somewhere or I was going to work, but I was taking my son to mass. It was like right after we had a baby. And I was taking my son to mass, just me and him. She was supposed to come with us, but texted me when I was already on my way. And she was like, I'm not going to make it. I have a dead car battery. And so he was able to come over while we were at mass, which was awesome. And he spent like 4 hours with her, went home twice for more tools, went and bought a tool, and then took her to get a new car battery and replaced it for her. And just was like totally light about it. She, as a thank you, got him a gift card, and he and his wife took her out to dinner with the gift card when they went out to use the gift card. And so that's the exact thing. He makes light of favors while he does them, but then he takes it just like Jesus Christ does when he comes to earth. He does this a lot in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5-7. He says, you have heard it said that you should not commit adultery, but I say to you that every man who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. He says, you have heard you should not commit murder, but I say to you, everyone who is angry at his brother has committed murder, is sinning. Jesus comes and he doesn't say, oh, I'm going to lower, like a lot of modern kind of woke Christians will do, say, oh, I'm going to lower the bar. Like Jesus comes and like nothing's a sin anymore, and like love who you love and do whatever you want. That's the opposite. Jesus comes and says, you thought Moses kind of held you to a high standard? I'm coming to take it even higher. And then he says in his parting words, right? We just celebrated the resurrection of our Lord. In Matthew 28, you read about the resurrection, and then he goes on. At the bottom, we have the Great Commissioning, where he says, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. And remember that I'm with you always. Those are his parting words in the end of the Gospel of St. Matthew. And so we see that Jesus raises things to a new level. So not only should we not be, you all had people like this, your dad maybe, or friends who you ask for a favor, and they make it seem like this is a huge deal. You owe me one. You owe me next time, right? That's how the non-Christian acts when people ask him for favors. He says here, he makes light of favors while he does them. He says, no, it's not a problem. Don't worry about it. I'm happy to do this. I'm happy to help. And to give people opportunities to serve, right? Let me be as Christ to you, and you be as Christ to me. That's what Christian friendship and relationship is, and how we should act together as members of the church, that we should be willing to receive service and favors and love from other people, and we should be willing and eager to give it to other people when we get the opportunity. But he's calling us to this extremely high level of virtue, to where you seem like you're receiving when you're giving. That's powerful. To seem like you're receiving the service, you're receiving the act of kindness, the act of love when you're giving. That's big if you're able to do that, if you're able to actually seem like you're receiving when you're giving. Many, many people are not able to do that. They're not willing to do that. All right, now I'm going to go back to reading here because this next paragraph is probably my favorite. He says, he never speaks of himself except when compelled, never defends himself by a mere retort. He has no ears for slander or gossip, is scrupulous in imputing motives to those who interfere with him, and interprets everything for the best. He is never mean or little in his disputes, never takes unfair advantage, never mistakes personalities or sharp sayings for arguments, or insinuates evil which he dare not say out. From a long-sighted prudence, he observes the maxim of the ancient sage, that we should ever conduct ourselves towards our enemy as if he were one day to be our friend. He has too much good sense to be affronted at insults. He is too well employed to remember injuries, and too indolent to bear malice. He is patient, forbearing, and resigned on philosophical principles. He submits to pain because it is inevitable, to bereavement because it is irreparable, and to death because it is his destiny. This paragraph is obviously packed with a lot of good stuff here. Again, he's kind of going on the same theme that I touched on already in that former paragraph, where he says he never speaks of himself except when compelled. But he interestingly goes on to say he never defends himself by a mere retort. This means that if you're getting criticized or you're being insulted or whatever, you don't have to snap back. You don't have to just be sharp and attack back the person who you feel like is attacking you. But this next line is really, really key. He has no ears for slander or gossip. This is such a sin of our time. It's mostly, I think, similarly to lust for men. Gossip tends to be a very feminine vice. It's not exclusive to women by any means, which is why it's written here in the definition of a gentleman. Just like lust is not exclusive to men, but it does tend to be on one side or the other. And it can be a sign, of, I think, of a lot of times of effeminacy. And good men, a lot of times, do not have any desire to gossip. I'm one who I find myself in this boat. I think it's fun to talk about other people. It's fun to talk about other people's issues or the things they're doing that are crazy or whatever. I think that can be enjoyable. It's a temptation. But this is a great reminder that we're not meant to have ears for these things. If somebody starts to talk negatively about other people, you can either, there's times to directly say, hey, let's not talk about them. I know they're in a tough situation. We should pray for them. Let's not talk about that right now, if that's okay with you. But how is this going? It's okay to give some slight and sometimes direct encouragement or rejection of a topic, but you can also just easily guide the conversation to a different direction. Imputing the motives of those who interfere with him. So people who get in your way or jump you in line, giving people the benefit of the doubt. He says explicitly here, he interprets everything for the best. And that is something that is really beautiful. And it doesn't make you weak. I think a lot of times we have this misconception that if you give people the benefit of the doubt, it actually makes you weak. We have this, I was just talking today, I'm recording this on the day that it was announced that Pope Francis died. And it's incredible to see, especially on secular news sites, but even some of the conservative news sites, so many Protestant Christians and some Catholics who are like rejoicing and making all these judgments about Pope Francis and his death. And I've been you'll find podcasts of me criticizing Pope Francis and his decisions or a lot of times his ambiguity with things and his silence after causing controversy, which I didn't appreciate. But I'm not going to rejoice at his death. I'm not joyful that he died. And I think that I am called to interpret everything that he did for the best and not to say, oh, yes, he's intentionally misleading us. He's intentionally causing confusion and sowing division in the church. Maybe he was, but it's not my responsibility or my place to judge that and to interpret it in negative light. And that's something that is really difficult for us because it seems so masculine. It seems so based, right? That I'm going to assume that Joe Biden is evil and he's doing all these things personally and intentionally ruining our country. And maybe he was, but I think it's a better interpretation to say he was senile and he probably didn't know a lot of what was going on. And he was weak in that he did a lot of what other people told him to do without standing on principle or defending especially his faith and the moral values that he was aware of and that he should have lived out better. But I think trying to interpret things for the best, even those little mistakes and annoyances that people commit to your daily life. And this is really practical and impactful in marriage. I can tell you that from my own experience, successfully and in my failures, of interpreting things for the best. To assume that my wife is doing her best and not striving to intentionally annoy me, not trying to intentionally inconvenience me, but to interpret things and say, she's busy, she's got her hands full, I can take this graciously. And there's still times to stand up for yourself, to say, hey, I know it's a small thing, but this is speaking from a recent example. I'd really like it if you put my slippers back in the place where I like to put them, so that way I know where they are in the morning when I want to wear them. It's a little thing, it's an annoyance, but it doesn't mean that I have to assume when I find them in the closet, which is not where I want them to be, that, oh, she's trying to sabotage me and ruin my day. And if you're married, you know that a little example can mean a lot and can cause a huge fight. And so interpreting things for the best while still being willing to stick up for yourself, to stand up for the truth when necessary is really good. But we have a huge temptation into slander and gossip, a huge temptation, and our modern world where we have way too much access to news, federal news and worldwide news that we don't need to know about. We all would benefit from not knowing what Pope Francis is saying on airplanes. We would have benefited from that while he was alive. And that would have been the truth 1,000 years ago. We wouldn't know about 80% of the things that he did that caused controversy within the church wouldn't have been known. And sometimes there's good to us knowing some of the things that are happening, and there's a lot of bad that comes from it as well. But it's your responsibility, your job to interpret things for the best. He is never mean or little in his disputes. So he doesn't try to belittle other people, and he doesn't try to intentionally be mean. He doesn't try to intentionally hurt other people's feelings. He never takes an unfair advantage. This means he's not going to just try to embarrass somebody or, again, belittle them in some capacity. It's going to remove or demean their argument, their points that they're making, by making personal character attacks and things like that. I like that it says here, he never mistakes personalities or sharp sayings for arguments. This is something I can be a lot better with. My family does this to me a lot, where sometimes it's just personality things in their tone or the way they talk. And I can take it as an attack, which a lot of times is not meant to be. And this is why this is so challenging to read. Like every sentence of this I'm guilty of. And so it's so good for me to I love to return to it every now and then. And I like to pray with this and just think about, Lord, I need so much help in these areas. And thinking about specific examples where I violate them and taking somebody's personality or just something they say that might sound sharp. And just know that maybe they're not arguing. Maybe they're out of breath. And that's why they're yelling. Or that's why they're tired or whatever it is. But you don't have to assume that somebody's trying to fight with you all the time. I love the line about we should conduct ourselves towards our enemy as if you were one day to be our friend. We're obviously generally not very good at this. Once somebody is an enemy, especially in our woke culture today, our culture of cancellation, that if you've wronged me, if you do something that's wrong, you're done, right? We're done. There is no time for repentance. There is no room for that. There's no space for that. And it's obviously very negative and not good for the world or for society or for ourselves. And so to treat people that you know have problems with you, and I have made my fair share of enemies while creating content and just living my life as the person that I am. But when I see these people out, it's very challenging for me, but it's a good reminder. I should treat my enemies as if they will one day be my friend. This means treating them and extending to them the same hospitality, the same kindness, the same love, the same energy that I do to people who I am friends with. And it's going to be more difficult. Maybe it's toned down, right? I'm not going to go over and be fake and extra excited to see somebody who I'm not excited to see, but I can still treat them with dignity and respect. And that's kind of the main thing here. Not intentionally being childish and trying to avoid somebody who you have a problem with or you don't like or you've had a history of issues with, but just being willing to embrace them. Say, hello, how are you? How are things going? How's your family? And having a conversation, winning people over with love. It's very obvious that Christians amongst Christians, we should do this, but we're really bad at it. And it's really sad that we're so not good to each other. The next line here, he has too much good sense to be affronted at insults. Too much good sense. Think about that. He's saying you're too smart to be bothered by people insulting you. Why? What does that mean? This means that I am a son of the living God. I'm a beloved, adopted son of the God who made the entire universe. And I'm going to get upset about something some person has to think about me or has to say about me? That's dumb, right? It's just stupid. It's stupid how upset we get when somebody insults us. Jesus himself, who was perfect, was insulted and spat upon and didn't respond. And yet every time somebody insults me, I feel the need to defend myself and to get aggressive and insult them back, and I'm going to get them back. Jesus very clearly says this is not how we're supposed to be. Turn the other cheek was not meant just towards physical violence. You're able to be insulted and not respond and say, is there anything else you have to say? And it's really powerful. And it can be really powerful when you do that, when you don't fight somebody back when they're trying to bully you or belittle you or whatever it might be. But to stand there with confidence and dignity and say, okay, I didn't appreciate that, but let's move on. And I have too much good sense to be affronted at the insult of some person. He's too well employed to remember injuries, to remember the mistakes and injuries that people have inflicted upon you in the past. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. We pray this every day in the Our Father. Hopefully you're praying to Our Father every day. Forgive us our trespasses. We forgive those who trespass against us. He's too well employed to remember injuries. That's that right there. Too indolent to bear malice. You should not bear malice towards other people or wish ill upon other people. Patient, forbearing, and resigned. He submits to pain because it is inevitable. Submitting to pain to say, okay, you're going to experience pain. There's going to be times where you experience pain. You don't need to scream expletives. You don't need to be soft about it and drag it out and basically do the LeBron flop in every single, whether it's emotional pain, physical pain, societal pain that you experience, and drag it out and be dramatic about it. It's okay to just experience some pain, discomfort, and to bear it and to go about your life. This last paragraph, I'm going to read it just to kind of close us out here. I don't think it's as impactful. I think that third paragraph is really where a lot of the meat is in this, but I think it's good to just kind of to finish here. And there is still some goodness to go through, but we're about wrapping up here. Going back to his words, Cardinal Newman says, if he engages in controversy of any kind, his disciplined intellect preserves him from the blundering discourtesy of better, perhaps but less educated minds, who, like blunt weapons, tear and hack instead of cutting clean, who mistake the point in argument, waste their strength on trifles, misconceive their adversary, and leave the question more involved than they find it. He may be right or wrong in his opinion, but he is too clear-headed to be unjust. He is as simple as he is forcible, and as brief as he is decisive. Nowhere shall we find greater candor, consideration, indulgence. He throws himself into the minds of his opponents. He accounts for their mistakes. He knows the weakness of human reason as well as its strength, its province and its limits. And that's how he ends it there. What I like about that is I think he does kind of close it with being willing when you do have arguments, when you are engaged in controversy, kind of how you should handle yourself. To say there's going to be people out there who may be less educated than you but smarter than you. You're going to account for your opponent's mistakes in their argumentation. You're going to recognize people who are in too deep, that are in philosophical waters they can't swim in. So you're having arguments with people and they can't comprehend basic philosophical principles. They can't actually reason well, and you're not going to continue to argue with them. Once you realize and determine somebody's being irrational, you're not going to get yourself all worked up over fighting with somebody that isn't going to ever hear you or actually join your side or understand your side of the argument. You're willing to recognize that you may be right or wrong in your opinion, but he says here, you're too clear-headed to be unjust. That you realize that virtue is more important than being right or wrong and winning the argument. And then lastly, he closes with just saying that you know the weakness of human reason as well as its strength. That it can be a great tool, a great source of good in this world, but it also has its limitations and it's not perfect. And that sometimes people reason wrong, whether it's you or other people. And so I love this. So I just want to encourage you guys to, I'll include a link to this in the show notes to the full definition of a gentleman, but I want you to spend some time reading through this, praying with it. If there's anything that stuck out to you in this, if you had a favorite line or anything like that, please share it in the comment below. And know of my prayers for you as you strive to be a gentleman or help raise gentlemen in your own life, or to help encourage your husband or your boyfriend or your fiance to be a better gentleman in your life. Let's help restore this culture of being a gentleman, of making people's lives easier, of making people's lives better, of being others focused and not self-focused. That's what you're called to, and that's what excellence looks like as a man. Thanks for listening today or watching if you're watching on YouTube. God bless you, and I look forward to being with you next time. Go out there and be your best.